Good morning, bonjour for the French speakers. Thank you very much for attending this event. I think you are very brave for being here and not on the other side of the hotel on the beach, enjoying the sun and the ocean. Maybe later. My name is Elizabeth Simao. I'm partner at Cambridge Management Consulting. It's an honor to be serving as your moderator today, and thank you to Career Community for the opportunity. Before we get started, I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. Start with you.
Hello. Hello. It's working? Yeah, okay. Welcome, everybody. I'm José Burraia. I'm in charge of investments and engineering department in the Caver Telecom, CV Telecom. I have 20 years of experience in this sector, beginning with mobile, and then we go from last 8 years covering all domains, and the last 3-4 years now in this international connectivity domain. Okay, so we are happy to host this meeting here, and I'm going to pass to my colleague here. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, all. My name is Jorge Santos. I have two roles. The first one, I had the international wholesale unit in Altis, Portugal. For those of you might know, former Portugal Telecom. But today I'm here representing the board of the, I would say, newly created Portuguese Data Center Association. So thank you for hosting us. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Aaron Costa. I work for DKX Management GmbH. I oversee strategic activities within the African and South America continents. Thanks CVT Telecom for hosting us here.
Hello, my name is Andreas Fink from Fink Telecom Services. We are a backbone provider connecting Western Africa. We are active in almost every African country from Lagos up to Portugal, including Cape Verde Telecom. And I was also involved in building data centers in various places. And I'm already over 30 years in this industry, so hope we can contribute something to the discussion.
Thank you very much. And from my end, a very quick introduction on Cambridge Management Consulting. We are a boutique consultancy. We are just over 200 consultants in 22 countries, so we've got a global reach. And our capabilities focus on the private and public sector with their people, processes, and challenges in digital transformation. So just before we get started here, we will have the opportunity for Q&A at the end of the session. So please hold on to all your questions. Don't let them go away. And we will happily answer your questions at the end. Just, I'd like to give a key metrics and key points before we jump into the specific questions. So Africa, home to 1.4 billion people, or in other words, 17% of the global population. And yet, Africa global data center capacity only represents 1%. The African data center market is projected to grow from what was $2 billion in 2020 to $5.4 billion in 2027, with key hubs in South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Morocco, Egypt. We'll come to those, hoping that we hear from you. And finally, demand for data centers is expected to exceed supply by 300%. So based on that, my first question to our panelists here is what do you see as the key drivers for this demand? And is there a difference across Africa between West Africa, East Africa, North or South? Who wants to start?
Well, maybe I start. I think the key driver for capacity in data centers in Africa is basically like everywhere else. Governance needs to store data on some servers. Corporations need to store data in servers. And because of the lack of data centers, they currently do this far away in the United States or somewhere in Europe. But it starts to be a problem because you have latency issues, you have issues with data protection and such things. But that's the only thing which is available to them today. And the key factors why it's not available in Africa is availability of power, stability of power, availability of bandwidth, and probably also political factors that you need special licenses to operate data centers, and maybe also the capital investment, which is missing, and the know-how is missing inside the country. So that's why everybody goes outside. But I think this is going to change because African operators and governments, they get more educated. They understand that it doesn't make sense to have like health insurance data from the country stored somewhere in the United States. I mean, it's also an autonomy question.
I actually tend to agree with what you just said, and from the last GGCM that we had here, that was one of the points also we touched on it. And if we can see the developments not only on the western part of Africa, but also on the east part of Africa, there have been some deployments already happening when it comes to the data center neutral facilities, mainly driven by guys like Raxio or OADC, iColo, and so on and so forth. So there is already something happen, which is very positive, because obviously running an IX like we do globally on a global scale, neutrality is fundamental. Power, like you said, and obviously, we need to make sure that those paper projects get executed on time. So we can start building the ecosystems around the continent, I would say.
Just to add, of course, we need to take into account that it's clear for all of us that we live in a digitalized economy, and this means that all of our business is going into the cloud, and this means that we need lower latency to access all of this computing and storage abilities or capabilities. And so all of this does bring is one of the drivers, of course, for the data center industry to move closer to the customers, and this means, of course, closer to Africa or within Africa. Of course, it brings a lot of challenges into the African continent, not only for power, and I think this will be a huge question during the panel, but also for the whole ecosystem, how to develop the whole ecosystem that revolves around data center industry. So yeah, you see this demand, like Andreas and Darwin mentioned, with this need to move clouds closer to customers, but also a lot of challenges that the African continent needs to tackle yet.
Yes, I would complement with something. We would say that internet penetration and digital transformation, it trends to accelerate. And as the economy, the global economy, it trends also to rely on digital economy. Means this is it's a crucial need to accelerate the expansion of to the access of the connectivities, and the need to have the data protection, sovereignty of and national security. Means that you need storage close to you. There is a trend to edge data centers to bring low latency applications. Not only for that, but also to make the ecosystem more resilient, like redundancies. This, you can talk about the geopolitical issues that start to push, the need to have more alternatives. And so beside this, of course, you have the boom of AI, that's you're talking, and the boom of cloud computing and the CDNs. All of these needs bring the need to build more infrastructure. So, and if you see when you have these tensions, like geopolitical tensions, and Africa, it's still a developing country, but we have strong resources, you know, and to bring, I mean, one of the main challenges is the power, for example, and this is one of the main resources we have that can lead us to good solutions to make it sustainable. And this maybe leads the investors to look into Africa as a good chance to make the sustainable business. Okay, I think this would be my idea why this is increasing business in Africa.
Okay, thank you, Jose. And I think you make an interesting transition to the next topic, which is to look at the challenges that are present in this ecosystem. So yes, neutral data centers are developing, like you were mentioning, Darwin, but then there's a number, and we know there's a number of challenges around. You know, we see this globally, but certainly in Africa, there are quite a few that need to be tackled. So how do you seeing those challenges being overcome? Darwin or George?
Yeah, I mean, it's each market is different, obviously. Each market has its own specifics, and I think you guys mentioned about latency and sending packets and data protecting. Those are the things we really need to take seriously, especially in the continent where we are. Because I mean, you don't want to start sending traffic out of, I don't know, your forecast all the way back to Germany or to London or to Lisbon or whatever, if you can just keep the traffic or being exchanged locally, right? And I think at the end of the day, this is one of the things you are looking at, because if you talk about digital transformation, like you said, then you can also say that latency is the new currency. And why is that? Because if you cannot just make optimal as it should be while you are running a network, then your customers will be bored. 10 years ago, if you were browsing over your phone and you open a page and it takes time to load, then you could say, oh, okay, it takes time, let's wait a little bit. Nowadays, it's not like that. It's like, if you want to look up for something, your children, our children, or our families and members, they want to have, quick as possible responses for what they are looking for, right? Just imagine how many queries ChatGPT has on daily basis, from multiple users everywhere. And I think at the end of the day, we just have to make sure that we have the infrastructure ready to cope with everything which is coming, all these big waves that are coming on our hand, whether you are sitting in South America or in Africa or in Europe or whatever the place is. But if you look into the cable capacity available in Africa itself, and if I might take Georgia as a reference, Portugal, right? More than 15 subsea cables active for 10 million people, right? Not more than that. And then we look into Africa. I don't know how much available capacity we have currently, but certainly not enough for the numbers you just mentioned in the beginning, right? So eventually, yes, cables like Equiano landing in the country, like the one from to Africa coming on board as well, will definitely help us out, with whatever it's coming up, those big waves coming up towards us. But that's just the wet part of the thing, right? And then eventually you need to work on the terrestrial fibers, data center, and all of the other factors, which will then impact how you build an ecosystem in different countries and regions.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Darwin just said. And one thing that is key in this kind of industry is the pace that you can move forward, how to cope with all the demand that is coming, and the amount of time you need to build new infrastructure, and of course data centers themselves. It is really interesting to see on these last 2 years the amount of growth that we have seen in Africa in terms of investment on new data centers. Just like Darwin said, we had the Raxio and open access data centers, but also the big ones, they have invested directly into Africa. We have seen Equinix going into Nigeria, acquiring main one data centers, and also Digital Realty acquiring Terraco in South Africa. So we see that there is now a kind of a momentum moving forward, and this will help the industry as a whole to grow in Africa. Nevertheless, although this brings more attention and more investment capacity into the whole continent, the key question is how is Africa going to tackle the power stability issue and the total power availability issue for data centers is key to look into countries, into what other continents are doing to develop their own power infrastructure, and how everyone is trying to achieve something of more of a sustainable, not only stability, but also sustainable power sources. Let's say, for example, and to give an example of what is happening in Portugal, in 2024, the total amount of renewable energies used in the consumption in the country was between 70 and 75%. And this is huge comparing to a few years ago where we were still using coal energies and acquiring a lot of gas from Northern African countries, etc. Of course, it's not just the topic of availability, of how much power you have available for data centers, is the question of how stable it is and can it cope with an industry that needs to work continuously without faults. And this is not let's say gen set based type of infrastructure. Doesn't make sense.
Do you think, and I will then ask Anders, but do you think that Africa has what it takes to overcome those challenges? Andreas, and we were talking this morning about the challenges that you face on your daily basis.
I think when it comes to data centers and what you two have mentioned, there's a key important factor which we haven't mentioned yet, which is politics. I see this a lot in Western Africa. When you talk to one country and you want to build something like data centers, you are facing the problem that power is not available, which means you have to build the whole power infrastructure yourself. Now, in Western Africa, the advantage you have is there's plenty of sun, and the sun is shining all the time, and it's shining very strong. So you can build very power efficient solar farms to power your data center, but you need batteries to store the battery. So you could even create a completely island independent system. But that just means that you need to invest more money to build the data center and the power infrastructure to power your data center. And you have to build the fiber to actually give connectivity to the data center. So the investment becomes quite huge. On the other hand, it's a good investment because if you are building the power plant, you're building something where you have to pay for the power in advance by investing it, but actually operating it costs you almost nothing because the sun is shining, is producing power. So you need some personnel to clean the solar panels and some security and so on, but that's it. You don't need to pay anything for like oil and gas to burn it in your generators. But the second problem then is also how do you interconnect those data centers? Because it doesn't help you to have a data center in the middle of nowhere and nobody can connect to you. And then you need to have national fiber grids to interconnect to the neighboring countries and so on. Because if you're building a data center, let's say in Sierra Leone, where we're active, and you want to build something really good to fill that data center with customers from the country, you're not going to do this if you don't have a lot of customers like lined up to use it. Of course, there is demand from the country, but it's not that big yet. but it will come. So you might want to say, okay, now I'm building this very good facility, carrier neutral. I want to have the neighboring countries also use it. But then interconnecting the countries with each other basically means going to Europe and back, which totally destroys the latency factor. And the reason for this is just because of pricing politics. Every country is just looking for themselves. They don't want to interconnect directly with the neighboring country. And that's a completely different picture to what you see in Europe. In Europe, like in Switzerland, where I live, there's hundreds or even thousands of interconnects across the borders because there's independent carriers which have laid fiber 20 years ago. And there's an ecosystem where you can say, oh, I want to have a connection from Zurich to Frankfurt. I have like 20 different operators who can provide the dark fiber for me and at reasonable prices. Now, if you go into Africa, you go from one country to the next, you might have the situation that there is no fiber on land. You have to use the submarine cable. Or there is maybe one fiber, but the two parties who operate each part of the fiber, they cannot agree on how they sell it, or the government hasn't given them the permission to sell internationally, and all those kinds of things. And that slows down the economy in an enormous case. Like we have one discussion to interconnect one country with the next, and we're talking to them since over a year to get that. The cable is there, it's connected. I'm ready to pay them money to use this cable, but they cannot agree on how they're selling it. And that's, I think, is a factor which is putting the brakes on all those kinds of projects. But they start to understand slowly.
So a political twist.
Yes.
Around these challenges. And José, can you talk a little bit about what CVT is experiencing in terms of challenges in the ecosystem that you are building?
Yes, of course. In fact, they covered almost the challenges, but I would specify more the well, I would say the natural resources, like Mr. Fink said, the sun and the wind. It's not a problem for us. The government engagement, it's not a problem, because also we have an energy transition to program to reach 2040 around 100% of clean energy. But we face issues about the skills and talents shortage. This means that we depend on partnerships. We face the problem of high costs of investments, of constructions and operations. Again, leads us to make partnerships to make these projects real. And also, of course, we still have projects to enhance our connectivities. We are better in comparing the situation Mr. Fink was saying. We have a small company. We already have a big footprint of fiber inter-islands and international that reduce this blocking point, I mean, for investors. And so mainly these 2 points about the costs and the talents and the expertises in the country service.
Okay, so do you want to add anything else? I mean, we talked about the power stability, the issues with the skilled workforce, sustainable growth. Yes, growth, but it has to be sustainable, it's just not growth. What about security? Do you find any issues about cybersecurity that you may want to talk about? Is that an issue that you find in Africa?
I mean, cybersecurity needs to be taken into consideration at any kind of market or continent where you operate, right? And I think cybersecurity in Africa has been talked a lot. Whether it's being done something, I'm not quite sure, right? We do run exchange points we're doing with partners in Nigeria and DRC in Kinshasa. But I think maybe you know better how the situation is when it comes to cybersecurity in the continent nowadays.
I think the cybersecurity aspect has two sides. One of the side is the attackers. They don't see Africa as an interesting target yet, because if some cyber attacker wants to steal your bank account and then he finds some poor African and he can steal $50 from him, that's not interesting. But that might change. The second thing is that the
remember, sorry to interrupt, but 1.4 billion people, so $50 times 1.4.
It's but
a lot of dollars.
You would have to hack so many bank accounts. But what I'm trying to say is to make it's not a value target unless you find really some rich people there, and it's much harder. So that's one side of the coin. So the attackers might not look at Africa specifically. On the other hand, that doesn't mean it's not a danger. The danger, of course, is there. And I see a lot of problems that internet providers and data providers, they don't have the skill set to properly defend. I did a scan in Sierra Leone, in Guinea once, to see how many DNS servers are there like open to the public, and I realized that there's many there who could be abused for like denial of service attacks because they just don't know any better. And I think this could be a lot improved by better education, by events of the industry where people teach each other what to do. Like in Switzerland, we have an organization called SWINOG, Swiss Internet Network Operators Group, and they meet like twice a year or so, and people present the challenges they have. And a lot of network operators, they learn from those events and say, this is now a thing, they are attacked this way, and then they find solutions like black holing in internet exchanges and so on. But those organizations in Africa are not existing. We're trying to establish an internet network operators group in Western Africa, but the ISPs haven't really understood yet that this is a need and this is actually going to help them. But I think this will come. It's just a question of educating them about the awareness of those issues.
Actually, I would like just to comment on what you just said. When it comes to the NOGs, yes, a few countries in Africa, they don't do it, but we have the AFNOG, which is being and SAFNOG in South Africa, and I do things in Angola also with AONOG and so on and so forth. And yes, the main objective that we have, or that when you do such of events, is that you can exchange experience from abroad and with the locals and vice versa, where you definitely can learn from each other and try to apply in your own reality, right? Because each and every reality is totally different. But yes, those kind of NOGs are very important. And so I don't know if Cape Verde is one, but if not, would be awesome to have one also in Cape Verde. It's more technical related anyway, but it's important.
I think we've been discussing about cybersecurity, and it's not only cybersecurity. We need to think of physical security as well. And of course, this brings additional challenges. I know that 1-2 years ago, it was still pretty difficult to have in Africa manholes that were not subject to robbery, namely for copper purposes, to recover copper and to resell it on a different market. So we had a lot of issues. The companies in Portugal had a lot of issues with, namely with international connectivity out of Africa or into Africa, because of this kind of problems. But then there is also the question of what is Europe facing in this last few years, what we are seeing in Europe, and the targeting, the possible targeting of let's say, subsea infra in this kind of, let's say, Cold War. Does it affect Africa or not? I would say that at this moment, it doesn't affect Africa, namely because of all the entities involved in this kind of geopolitical discussion, let's say. They are all quite close to Africa and are keen to see Africa develop itself. But nevertheless, it needs to be taken into account to grow the physical security of all the infrastructure. We have seen something, for example, in Portugal, which is what should be considered a critical infrastructure for the economy and for the country to be able to perform its all of its duties and to support the population. And it's kind of a tricky question, namely because, of course, a digital economy, if we can think of, is completely critical for the functioning of a certain country. But in the end, what are we going to ask companies to do to protect their infrastructure that might be considered critical? What will be the amount of investment each company will need to make? Imagine that we decide that the ducts are critical infrastructure and that we need to put in every manhole a monitoring system, be it a digital one or with the cameras pointing to it. You understand that this kind of topic needs to be addressed as a whole, let's say, listening to all the parties that are and all the stakeholders to try to discuss how to implement it. But yes, it's important to define what is critical infrastructure, and for Africa, for the African region, I think it should be done as well.
So there's nothing that is being done at this level in Africa yet
So,
that you know of?
No, that I know of, but I wouldn't put my hands on the fire with with this kind of answer. So maybe.
But Andreas or José, do you know?
No, I would just comment about in case of Cape Verde, we have in the Cape Verde digital transformation strategy of the country, we have a framework, cybersecurity framework, that it's aligned with this all the initiatives about the digital transformation, and this is a public-private coordination, and us as a critical, we operate a critical infrastructure for the economy in Cape Verde, and we have this is something that we face very very close. We have services, we have companies that we work together and to enforce our cybersecurity. But at this point, the physical security, we face many issues about copper, copper, like he said, that was taken up from our network and to be sold. And this is a small country that it's easy, would be easy to just pick up the guys, but even it's we face problems. Imagine when it's more white issue, yeah. So it's for some situation, instead of cutting the copper, they cut fiber, for example, because they just want the poles. This is some situations that really we have to face, and this is a case of Cape Verde, but I imagine in Africa, for example, and so it have to be addressed in fact, because then let's say again, then we want to invest. It's some risk points, right? And we have to take care of the safety of these infrastructures.
Yeah. Thank you. And just you mentioned investments. So that's a good word for our next topic. What investments are you seeing that is taking place in the creation of new hubs? I mentioned earlier on about South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya are the digital hubs at the moment. But do you see heavy investment happening so that it goes out of those traditional centers?
Well, I don't know. I can start this time. Yeah, I can talk about this like our emerging hub in Cape Verde, like West Africa, Northern Atlantic hub. Uh, we are in this region. Some others, like you said, you have Egypt, you have Morocco, you have Senegal hub close to us. That is emerging hubs as well. And but we our position it's like in a ocean-based intercontinental hub. So this is a unique value we have because we have protection. We are protecting from the mainland, and so we can deliver the connectivity to the America, Europe, Africa. We are a good gateway to Africa. We have connectivity to Africa through the share cable. We have Link crossing Atlantic and WAX as well. And so this is something that this geostrategic position put us as a very interesting point for to build this hub. Okay, and together, as we said, these good conditions of the climate, the sun and the wind, and social and political stability as well. And again, the government engagement in this digital transformation and energy transition as well. So this is the points that make us believe that we have unique values, that this hub will be a very important hub in the future, in near future, for this to strengthen the regional connectivity and also the global connectivity.
Thank you. So watch out for this space, right? George.
Yeah, I cannot speak entirely on new hubs in Africa, but I can give you the example of what is still happening with Portugal and how it relates with the rest of Europe and what did exist in the rest of Europe and how it is changing. So you have let's say the triangle: customer, data center, connectivity. So a customer goes into a specific area if it has data centers to host their networks, and if it has connectivity enough to spread their services. Then you have, data centers will be built if there are customers and if there are connectivity. Yeah, and connectivity. Connectivity will grow for sure if there are customers coming and if there are data centers enough. And then there are all the other points, namely power availability, people or workforce available to work for this industry, and all the rest. And of course, it's what we have seen in Portugal is kind of all these things coming together at the same time. And it's important to have this kind of association like Portugal DC that can, on one hand, join the forces of all of all companies that work in the sector, and on the other hand, to try to promote the country not only internally, because we need to promote it internally to sell it to governmental authorities, to have public funding, to have private equity as well coming in, but also to promote the country externally, to show to the rest of the region that what exists in the country is good enough for the industry. More than that, is more than good enough. It has the right conditions for the industry to grow, and this will happen in Africa as well. The type of content being held in certain places now, it won't happen anymore. So the FLAP region, so Frankfurt, London, Amsterdam, Paris, will continue to be there as the most prominent data center places to be connected to. But we need to diversify and we need to continue to grow to where the connectivity is. Does it make sense for countries in Africa to continue to go to London and acquire services in London, where you have shorter routes and lower latency availability in terms of services in other regions? Let's say in Western Africa, be it Portugal or be it another country that is located in a lower latitude. And if you face the eastern side, it's the same. Do you need to continue to go to either Frankfurt or Paris when you have new hubs coming in all the rest of the Mediterranean, be it, once again, Southern Europe or Northern Africa as well? So all of this, it's like a bit of, to create these new hubs, there needs to be a new, there needs to be a change of minds and an ability to show that there is availability of services, there is availability of power, availability of infrastructure in all these kind of new regions, and that people are committed to develop the industry.
Yeah, and I think George also mentioned one important sentence which correlates with diversity and investment, right? So the well-known apps we know, you mentioned Equinix invested in Nigeria, obviously markets for them to invest there. DRT did the same in South Africa. But in the beginning, we spoke about the few data center providers which got investment and which build up data centers within the continent. And we see one of those entities, they build data centers in a non-app locations, like in Mozambique, like in Kinshasa, like in a Focus, and so on and so forth. And obviously that's what we need, because you mentioned 1.9 billion, that's what you said, right, in the beginning. I mean, we as a continent, we have a lot of people to be served. And obviously we need to look into the hubs, yes, but we also need to look into the non-hub regions, like you guys maybe are doing now, right? We're also doing that. For example, we decided to invest in Congo Kinshasa. It was a strategic decision for us. It's a country with 9 borders, more than 200 million inhabitants. I mean, the future is there, right? And whether the future might not be there now, but the future might be there in the future, and that's what we are looking at, And so I think we need to keep our eyes open, one. And secondly, yes, we cannot know where things will happen. It's like the same thing with intelligence, artificial, and all of these things that comes up like a buzzer, like trends. But anyway, we need to be prepared for it, right? And that's one of the things we as DKIX we did in Congo, and we are committed, to help the country when it comes to digital transformation.
Yeah, I would like to add also another aspect of it. When you're looking into Western African countries, they are very diverse. If you go to Nigeria, you have a booming economy, you have a lot of people and a lot of business there, and so on. But if you go to anything between like Senegal up to Cote d'Ivoire, you have a lot of smaller countries, and they are all struggling with having infrastructure. Like in Guinea-Bissau, when we were trying to start our internet provider there, they had less than 4% of internet penetration in the public, which means out of 100 person, only 4 even had access to the internet. And that means that if you are trying to build a data center there to serve this 4%, it's going to take you a long time to amortize it. And companies which have a lot of content, which they want to use data centers local, companies like Netflix, Amazon, and those kind of categories, they say, well, there's not enough eyeballs to justify this. So it all comes together that if you don't have enough people there who actually use the service, then it's not worth building anything. And because nobody builds anything, nobody uses it. So it's like a chicken and egg situation. And I think this is slowly changing because internet access becomes more broadly available, and because people like me are investing a lot in those countries to build infrastructure that actually people can use the internet for the first time in their life. But it's very hard in the beginning, because if I'm doing an internet provider in Europe, I can say, okay, I want to be an internet provider. I get a license. Yeah, it's like $400 a year. And then I go to fiber operators in the city. I do an agreement with them, and boom, I can serve everybody in that city. If you go to Africa, first, you need to get a license, and it's not $400, it's $200,000. And then there is no fiber network in the city. So you have to build that as well. And when you build that, then you realize the power is not stable again. You have to do this as well. So it's much, much, much harder to get to the point that customers can even use that service. And at that point, data centers will kick in because everybody wants to serve those customers from a local loop. But I see a lot of countries in Western Africa which are like forgotten countries. Just the fact that some of those countries did not have any outside connection on a submarine cable for many years. Like Guinea-Bissau was supposed to be connected to the ACE cable originally, and they couldn't do it because when the ACE was built, they had a civil war. And then they have like a new cable now going to Dakar, and that's like the only cable which gives them internet. That was like finalized 2 years ago or so. And so the only alternative is like satellite or microwave over the border. When I was there in 2014, I made an estimate based on the figure of the regulatory. And at that time, the whole country had 155 megabit. And that's a country with 1.7 million people. And if you put this into perspective, this is what we had in Europe like 1994 or even earlier. So those countries are left behind and they have a lot to catch up. But the thing is, if you are investing into those countries and you're starting to do those kind of things, it accelerates a lot faster because the technology is way more advanced now. So you can do a lot of things much cheaper and quicker than you had to do. So you don't go and, for example, put copper into the ground to put ADSL lines with phones. You put fiber into the ground right from the start, and you use the newer technology with the fiber, and you can build something fast. So I see a lot of potential. That's why we invest a lot into Africa, but there's still a lot of empty space to grow in all those countries outside South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, maybe Senegal or so. That there's still a lot to make up, and it's going to come.
There were even times, if I can recall correctly, 7 years ago, that it was even harder to extract capacity coming from the subsea, landing on the CLS, to bring it down to a data center facility in the main city, because the prices were just horrible to extract that, and different countries on the West Coast happened that, and still the case, So I left the continent for a while now, but I thought the case changed a bit, but still the case in some certain countries. But that's where projects like the one from Meten with 2 Africa and Equiano will hopefully bring some changes where they say it's an open cable system and everybody should be able to come to the landing station, pick up the capacity and provide services to the eyeballs, whatever they are of operations, right? In the past was not like that. It was a consortium, right? Everybody does his own thing in his own garden. It was like, you just have to deal with it, and I kind of like this open cable idea, because it gives hopefully access to everybody, like you mentioned, to provide services with quality and at least, on a very affordable costs. At the end of the day, that's what we want. Otherwise, it's like you said, people will never have the chance to experience access to the internet. And then we are talking about these wonderful projections that Africa has, but we needed to make a reality, first of all.
So thank you, and certainly a message of hope from the 2 of you. And unfortunately, we have to start thinking of closing this session. And before we open up to questions, I'd like to ask each of you a closing remark on hopes or fears for the future.
Okay, about hopes, we looking forward to enhance this our project that it's ongoing now to build this international ecosystem. With we have point of presence now to be built in Brazil. We have a data center, carrier neutral data center project ongoing. We have we're also looking for projects, subsea cables that crossing like Medusa. It's a project that can also enhance our local ecosystem. Amilcar Cabral cable, also it's a project that can enhance our project.
And I think we have a session tomorrow with
About
management
this,
talking
yeah.
about that. Right?
Yes, and so this is what it's our hope. Our hope it's to make this real. We are engaged into this project with we have already good partners like Equinix, the Kicks, Afrix, Console Connect from PCCW, PAIX. So we are working with good players. We have good customers like Mr. Fink, CMC Networks, China Unicom, Angola Cables, for example. So this is it seems like shows that people are trust us, as this is a good point to interconnect and to make this ecosystem to be more strong in this region. Okay, so this is our main target.
All positive thoughts
Yes.
here.
Yeah,
Excellent.
Yeah, I think that usually we tend to, in these panels, to think of the challenges, etc., for a certain region, but in fact, we have seen a huge development in Africa, and I believe that with all that we have discussed, the number of the population that the continent has, its eagerness to have more connectivity, the new projects coming in, new investors that have done well in other regions to come and invest in Africa. This means a lot, and it means that there will be a boom in terms of not only connectivity but also infrastructure for the continent. Andreas mentioned a lot of challenges in terms of certain countries, and that will continue to be a reality. But if the continent develops itself as a whole, it will help all the countries. I would say that on our side for Portugal DC, what we hope is that on one hand, well, it's not a hope anymore, it's a reality. The new projects come into force as quickly as possible. So I would say that by 2026, there will be an additional 250 to 300 megawatts of new data centers deployed in Portugal alone. With projects already have been presented themselves with being able to reach up to 1.2 gigawatt. And this is also something that is important for Africa. Namely for AI, new projects and new infrastructure will grow where power availability is and where power stability is. So I would say this is the main topic. I would say that Africa needs to progress as quickly as possible. So there's my hope for Africa.
Thank you.
No fears, just hopes that we can execute everything we have on the paper at a fast pace, and eventually we as DKIX, we are here to contribute, and we are always open and looking into new markets where it does make sense, and where we have power stability, carrier neutral data centers, and where we can build ecosystems like we have been doing globally.
Yeah, my hope is actually that governments start to understand that the economy is global and that they have to adopt and to develop new markets and make it happen, that investors can come into the country and build infrastructure with their experience, with their money, and make it simpler to the benefit of everyone.
It's a small world in the
Yes.
end. Thank you very much. So we'll open up to questions now. So if anyone has anything to ask our panelists, now is your chance. No questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for being here. A round of applause to our panelists. Thank you very much again. It was a fantastic session. I'll see you.